I am Robert Murphy, and I just want to thank Jordana and the entire Recon Network for hosting this Vet Summit. I think this is an incredible opportunity, and I seriously wish we were in person doing this. I've figured out how to do this remotely, and I hope this video works. But seriously, it's an honor to be able to be here today and have you spend the next 45 minutes with me listening and learning about this opportunity that you have with your GI Bill. You know, my goal is really that maybe just one person would state, I'm glad I heard this information before I use my GI Bill. Now, my hope is actually that everybody says, Murphy's information is actually pretty common information, and I'm glad he did this, fist bump to you, but we've got this already. But my fear actually is that someone, and I hear this all too often when I'm done with this presentation, will probably say, I wish I would have heard this information 2 years ago, or a year ago, even 6 months ago, before I used up half or a majority or all of my benefits while going to school. But regardless of where you're at and what position you're in here today, whether you're a military veteran or whether you're a military spouse, or even if you're a military family member and somebody along the way gave you some of those military benefits, I'm here to talk to you today. What I've dubbed this presentation is Welcome to Room 101. Making the most out of your GI Bill, make it make sense, but optimizing the employment considerations that go in that you should be considering as it goes into utilizing your GI Bill, whether it's the Montgomery GI Bill, the Post 9/11 GI Bill, and we'll talk about the differences of those as well. This is not a VA GI Bill summit, so to speak, where I'm reviewing all of those GI Bills. You have probably sat down through a lot of those lectures through your transition assistance programs, or you've been on the GI Bill website. The VA has incredible information out there regarding all the differences of those GI Bills. What I'll specifically be talking about today is how to optimize that GI Bill, looking at industry and how to utilize your education to be able to hopefully meet the needs of industry's requirements that are out there. And again, it's probably written somewhere on this screen, but I am with the University of South Carolina, Aiken. I'm the director of a really cool office called the Office of Veteran and Military Student Success, where my team and I do this for a living. There's about 13 of us there on campus, and our job is to help assimilate military-connected people to the university, to whether they're using a GI Bill or they're not using a GI Bill, to be able to optimize whatever benefit they may have out there to ensure they're progressing along with the university. And specifically, our vision is to best position veteran and military students to achieve their education, their career, and their life goals. So our job is just to clear the way and allow them to keep on being successful as they were while they were in the military. If you're a military spouse, while your husband or your wife was serving in the military, and now that you've landed on a campus someplace, we want to make sure you get the most out of that experience. So as I walk through, I have 6 specific areas that I plan on speaking to you about today. And when I say optimizing your GI Bill, getting the most out of that benefit and your education, so hopefully you can land where you want to land. That's why I stated earlier, it's just not a VA GI Bill summit that I'm giving here today. There's 6 areas, and as I get done talking or speaking on each of the 6 areas, then a specific slide is going to come up asking you a specific question on that area, and hopefully challenging you to write down that question to say, I've got to get this figured out. And once we get these things figured out, from knowing self to the industry and then into higher education, before we even start thinking about using our GI Bill, we should have answered 3 specific questions from the area up top. And then what you see down here at the bottom of your screen is then we get into your education benefits, just not the GI Bill, but the state and the federal benefits that are out there as well. Then we look at your time and your opportunity. How are you using your time and what opportunities are out there? And then finally, you have to make that decision and moving forward and making that decision. So let's kind of plow through this and see where we land in a few minutes. So when I start this lecture, and so what I'm getting ready to do for you is what I do almost on a weekly basis on my campus. When a veteran or a military spouse walks into my office and they're whether they're an 06 or whether they're an E3 and they walk into my office, what I have learned not to ask, which is the questions that your parents and people have been asking us for years, is what do you want to do when you grow up? And there's just questions that are not the right questions. They're the wrong questions. So therefore, what are the right questions? And that's what we need to be looking at, is what are the right questions. So in this time that we're going to be spending here together, a lot of it is what I do each and every day. And I condensed this into this 45-minute lecture to be able to speak through all of these specific answers to hopefully land on this idea of, how do I want, or what do I want to use my GI Bill for? What do I want to use this education for? Which starts with that first area of knowing yourself. You know, it was Socrates when he stated this question, that people that make themselves appear ridiculous when they are trying to know obscure things before they know themselves. So think about this for a moment. Depending on what your age you're landing in this conference right now, the bigger question should be, and you've heard this before, is where do you want to be in 5 years from now? Where do you want to be in 10 years from now? The question I ask when I teach in the School of Business, when I'm teaching a management and leadership course, is during your prime money-making years, which is usually about 27 to about 52 years old. During that time, a lot of things happen in your life, but what does your life look like? I mean, one of the bigger questions that you should be asking yourself is, you know, where do you want to live? Are you on the West Coast or the East Coast? Are you up north or down south? Are you overseas? Are you traveling? Are you in a city? Are you in a suburb? So even before we start thinking about going to college or getting a degree, probably a more important thing to be asking ourselves is, who am I? What are my goals? How do I know myself before I can start knowing some obscure information that I might learn in a degree? Just who am I, and how do I position myself? Another great question is, by the time you're 35, are you married? Do you have children? Are you driving? Are you commuting? I've actually had military members in my office coming to our campus looking to get a degree, and then one of the questions I ask them, as I'm asking you here today as well, is, where do you plan on living? And they say, I just love this area that I'm currently in, whatever that area may be, and we do some research, and you know, I'm probably one of the first guys to tell them, you know, that industry is not in that area. It's just, you know, unless you plan on being an entrepreneur or something that's in that area, that particular engineering degree or science and engineering degree is really not the employment opportunity in that area that you want to live. It is not there. And the lights kind of go off, and it's that idea of connecting. These 6 points that we're talking about here today, I think, is the essence of where Socrates was going when he made this statement here. So the question I want you to write down in knowing yourself is here it is right here in the slide. Write down what you want your life to look like in 5 to 10 years from today. What is your why? What is your purpose? Ask those specific questions. The easiest one may being is, where do you want to live? What does your life actually look like? What's your house look like? Are you driving and commuting into a city? And if you want nothing to do about that, then perhaps you need to be thinking about living in the suburbs, but then how does your cash flow going to take place while you're living in the suburbs, or whether you're living in the country? Are you in a coat and a shirt every day, or are you at home working? Are you commuting? These kind of areas, it's this idea is just, what does it look like? So you come up with the top 5 or 10 questions that you need to ask yourself. Answer those questions, put a date behind it. Perhaps it's in your prime money-making years or 5 or 10 years from now, and just dream a little bit, getting to know yourself. Now, as you're doing that, now we're looking at point number 2 and looking at industry. What I call this area supply and demand. Now, you may realize this, but industry is the one who technically sets the demand that's out there for the careers that we're hoping to go into. Now, we're backwards planning a little bit. We're starting with ourselves, we're going to industry, but again, before we even think about using our GI Bill and what degree we should be using, we should be thinking about just, what's my why? What gets me out of bed in the morning? What would just motivate me as a passion to be able to say, this is what I want to be able to do? Not necessarily this is the job I want, but this is what motivates me. Then from there, we start looking at the industry in that particular area. So industry sets up the supply and demand. For example, what you see here in the slide in front of you is the cyber area. The cyber area in higher ed is what I call the Wild West, and I'll be talking about that in a couple slides to come. But here's an upcoming area specifically for all those military members who happen to get out and have a TS clearance and an SCI and some of the certifications and the qualifications that come along with the degree. The opportunities right there are endless. Then as you move into something that's a little bit more regulated, like engineering degrees, that has a specific degree path that you need to be going on. So again, what are those engineering degrees? What are those cyber degrees? What's the C-suite executive position that perhaps you want to see yourself into one day, whether it's marketing or whatever it may be, a Fortune 500 company? What is that position? What does it take to be able to get into that position? And I'm going to be giving you some life hacks in a couple slides from now to be able to look at industry and say, this is what industry requires, supply or demand. You're the supply, they're the demand, they're asking for it. And then how do I position myself in there? Then you can even go to the entrepreneur position. When you're looking at this position, this gives you a lot more latitude to move, to be flexible. But again, then you go into supply and demand. What does your customer base look like? As I went through my MBA class, and there was a lot of entrepreneurs in that class, and one of the biggest light bulbs that went off in my mind is entrepreneurs tend to fall in love with their service, their good, their widget, or whatever they plan on selling or promoting. They love it, but they're not really sure if their customers love it. So they'll do just about anything to be able to get that service or good to market, but they really haven't done a good customer survey to determine, is there a customer base out there. So again, as you're knowing yourself and you're looking at industry to determine what is the demand for, then you can back yourself into the industry, into the demand, and saying, can you supply that need that industry has? So I call this a spectrum of credibility. And when you're knowing yourself, one of the things that you're going to be looking at is, what is your current credibility, or what does your current resume look like? What does your current skill set look like? So then if you match that up with the requirements or the demand that comes from business, then we start looking at this spectrum of credibility, one from all the way to the left, which we'll talk about, and I'll use the cyber field as an example. There's a lot of credibility, but when it comes to higher ed, that may not necessarily be the way you need to go. We're over on the right-hand side of the spectrum. We'll take a look at nursing, where that requires not only you to have a lot of credibility, but you to have a lot of accreditation that comes from the college institution that you're looking for to be able to go ahead and work into that field. So like I said before, cyber is what I call in higher ed the Wild West. Higher ed just hasn't quite got its hands around this idea. Now, a lot of institutions have come up with a computer science degree, specifically with a cyber emphasis. But keep in mind, from the industry standpoint, industry right now is hiring at max capacity any E3, E4, E5, O1, O2, you name the rank, who has a top secret clearance, SCI, and holds those credentials or those certifications that the Department of Defense provides you through your practical application for your on-the-job training. So this, in a sense, gives you a high level of credibility. You have those credentials or that high level of credibility where perhaps a computer science degree may not necessarily be required to go ahead and transition out of the military and into your next successful career. So what I suggest for here is you're looking at the position descriptions. You're going out and looking at Department of Defense. You're looking at corporate. You're looking for private, for public institutions who need cyber people or network engineers from the Department of Defense. And you're looking at the position descriptions, and you're looking at the requirements. And you're going to see things like a bachelor's degree preferred. However, 2 to 4 years of experience will overarch the bachelor's degree. Then if you lay on some sort of clearances and specific qualifications or certifications, again, you bring a lot of credibility to that market. So consider that before you go into higher ed with what current credibility do you have. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum is something that I look at in higher education is the nursing. When you got the American Association of College and Nurses, there's accreditation. So you may be the corpsman, you may be the military medic, whatever medical position you had in the military. You have credibility in the field, But as far as industry is concerned, and we're on the second point of the 6-point presentation I'm giving here today, as far as industry is concerned, you don't have the credibility because the credibility then comes from the institution of higher education. It's the colleges who train up these nurses based on these accreditation protocols that we see. And one of the things we'll be talking about later on is when you're looking at higher education, you're looking at the credentials or the accreditation that come to that individual school. The School of Science in the chemistry department has its own accreditation, and biology has its own accreditation. Your School of Business should have its own accreditation. The School of Business accreditation for our institution at the University of South Carolina and is the same is the same as other institutions. And then you're looking at the industry. They're hiring people who the institution is accredited, and then you get your credibility from that institution. So on the nursing side, before you go down the road and looking at where you want to go to school, you're looking at perhaps the industry needs that are out there, the demands out there. You want to supply that demand that's out there. And then you need to say, are you credible? So this is the mix that we see a lot with our military corpsmen when they're thinking they should be able to receive experiential credit for the work they did in the military. But unfortunately, the industry drives that, and in this area specifically, insurance companies, the liability, the risk of exposure that the hospital that you may work for, the clinic you may work for, needs to be able to promote their credibility. And their credibility is based on 100% or 99% of all their employees have come from an accredited institution where they received their nursing degree, for example. So that's the other end of the spectrum that we see out there. And it's interesting, as I was preparing for this presentation, I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and you can see from this slide right here on October 20th, there's a question that Matt Murray answers just about every week, and the question was this. In response to our question about whether you would recommend an apprenticeship for someone starting out in your field, and here's two different spectrums, two different professionals who are hiring people. So I know this specifically is talking about apprenticeship, but it's also talking about a credibility and what type of credibility do you have. So you can see on the left hand of the slide from Kevin from Texas says, in my field of web development, absolutely yes, I would recommend this idea of an apprenticeship. And we'll look specifically at his words, where in Ohio, Rich says, I would be against apprenticeship in my profession of engineering. So here, right here on this slide, you can see that spectrum from all the way in the left. It's the web development. So apprenticeship would be, which is on-the-job training, which is not an accredited institution, but yet your skill set, your soft skills would be very beneficial. Whereas on the opposite side of the spectrum, this idea of engineering, then the accreditation from the institution is most important. So specifically, here's what Kevin states. I would estimate that a number of jobs that do not truly require comp sci level training is far higher than those that do. A willingness to learn, owning up to mistakes, being easy to work with are often more advantageous than a degree. Now, I know I work at an institution of higher education, but yes, I'm telling you this. My specific focus right here today is to those military members out there, not to my institution, but it's to the entire transition as we say that. So, advantageous than a degree. I would estimate that a sufficient level of skill to be productive at an entry-level web development position can be obtained with about 6 months of hard study. It won't be a top-tier web agency, but you will get paid as you continue to learn. So what you're hearing here, and I see this often if you look at Monster.com and other of the hiring agencies, ladies and gentlemen, soft skills are at the top of the list. Technical skills, hard skills that we call, are very important. However, your ethical credibility that comes along, your ability to communicate, your ability to come to work on time, there's things that are going to open the door for you at the interview table that get someone attention to your resume, and that is your experience. That is your ability to hold down a job and your ability to communicate and show where you take advancement and leadership very seriously. But on the web development side, you can see it's a credibility you have doing that without necessarily the college degree. Now you flip over to Rich, in Ohio, and look what Rich states. Now he's talking about the engineering profession. I would be against apprenticeship in my profession. Now we're not talking about an internship here. We're talking about an apprenticeship like on-the-job training. I've built lots of things as a military engineer. It's very much different than building lots of things in industry. My profession has a wide variety of niches and a certain amount of employment uncertainty. I don't think it would be doing anyone a service by doing an apprenticeship for them. I believe a college education would give them the necessary foundation and the versatility to be successful in that position. So what we've looked at here today is this spectrum from on-the-job training, the abilities that you have that you got out of the military, or being a military spouse and the experience that you have from traveling around, whatever it may be. There's a level of profession from the industry out there that you could probably walk into without a college degree. On the other end of the spectrum, you think about nursing and engineering and dental hygienist and x-ray tech, whatever those positions may be, then absolutely a degree or certification is called for to give you credibility. And remember, your credibility comes from the credibility of the institution, and the institution that's teaching with an accredited foundation that they have from a regional local accrediting agency. Some of the things I want you to check out, and remember we talked earlier about from the entrepreneur to the C-suite executive, where you plan on working. For the entrepreneurs that are out there listening to this message today, the Ventrepreneur, the veteran-owned and operated, it's a spin on the entrepreneur word, but it's a Ventrepreneur. It's the veteran who's an entrepreneur. And you think about Grunt Style, you think about Black Rifle Coffee, you think about there's a host of T-shirts and major restaurants and supply chains and logistics are being done with veterans. So you take a look at Ventrepreneur, and I encourage you to go to that link, and Jordana will be able to give you access to this information after this presentation is over. But look at it, it's a network of veterans, veteran-owned and operated companies from restaurants to you name it, who are working together to collaborate. And this is a huge, in vogue, niche organization right now. To be able to have that sticker on your storefront, whether you're a small florist or whatever it may be, veteran-owned and operated. Look, our nation wants to do the right thing. Our nation is always looking for how to say thank you to the men and women who serve, but put their thank you into action. And this is one way they're doing. They just love to go shop at a veteran-owned and operated store. And then you take a look at USA Jobs for something that requires more credibility or accreditation. Whatever position you think you'd like to see yourself doing, before you even think about walking onto a college campus, USA Jobs is my go-to area to see what is industry seeking when it comes to the idea of supply and demand. So you look at USA Jobs, you review the educational requirements, there's the link right there, and you're going to see a 4-year degree is required, or a master's degree, graduate level degree, or depending on the position again, a degree is preferred. But on-the-job training or job credibility, position credibility, experiential ideas is even more preferred and will outweigh whatever the degree may be. So look at that. Another area, a top tip that I have, is you go to any corporation, whether it's Starbucks or GM or Google, whoever, and you look at their board of directors. Go ahead and take a look at the board of directors and see where they went to school. There's ideas that come from the credibility of having an engineering degree from a specific school. You know, there's a lot of schools that jump out into our mind when we're thinking science, engineering, technology, one being MIT. When you're thinking about an international master's in business administration, you should be thinking about the Gamecocks, the University of South Carolina, with the #1 international MBA that's out there. Those hold weight. Those degrees have a lot of credibility. And when you're connected to that institution of higher education with a degree in that area that perhaps might be hanging up on your wall, that gives you some credibility. So out of all these areas we've just looked at, you're looking at knowing yourself and just what's your motivation and what gets you out of bed in the morning. Then you need to be studying industry. What's the supply? What's the demand? If the demand and the supply is over great, then the demand that may not be an area that you want to move into unless that area has a reduced number of supply in a specific geographical location, whatever that may be. So the question you're asking yourself is, what is your credibility gap? Measure your current credibility, that's your resume, your skills, your knowledge, your abilities, and what additional credibility do you require in order to have industry look at you very clearly. So, what gets you out of bed? What's your credibility gap? And then we're moving into higher education. Now, as we're moving into higher education, one of the areas that specifically we want to look back at is the industry. You're looking from higher education, moving from getting that degree into industry. So again, we've looked at what are the industry's wants, needs, desires, and then looking at your credibility. I mentioned to you your credibility gap, and can you get your credibility gap reduced or filled by that institution of higher education? So specifically, here's my institution, the University of South Carolina, located in Aiken, South Carolina. We do a lot of work with Boeing aircraft. When I was at Boeing Aircraft just a few months ago, you're thinking the engineers would be going out there, or the men and women who served in our military on the flight lines and aviation corps as wrench turners, that they'd be filled down there at the Boeing plant, whether it's the one in Washington or one here in Charleston, South Carolina. And during one of the briefs that we had heard, they couldn't get enough of chemistry majors. They are looking for men and women to come down to work at Boeing who have a chemistry degree. And I thought that was really interesting. So again, you go back to the institution of higher education. Is that that chemistry degree, does it have a accreditation that comes out of that institution, specifically that College of Chemistry or College of Science, Engineering, Math, and Technology? And that is that what Boeing is specifically looking for. Go on the Boeing website, look at the board of directors, see what degrees those current people have, and then can your institution fulfill that? Now again, when we're looking at the degree to industry, I can't help but stop for a moment and talk about this idea of degree to self-actualization. Because I realize today that there's people in this audience who are listening to my voice who are maybe not looking at the degree to go right into industry. I have men and women who come to our campus who are 100% permanent and total disabled. They're looking at utilizing their GI Bill, going to school, because there's so much more that goes on in higher education than just the idea of getting that degree. That's the ultimate goal, but there's more. So I could nerd out on a little bit right now with this idea of Maslow's and the hierarchy of needs that Maslow has, and the top rung that Maslow talks about is the self-actualization, getting to know yourself. So your degree to self-actualization is sometimes just as important as your degree moving into industry. So as you know yourself, let's not discount the idea of there's a lot of self-discovery that goes on during your time in higher ed that really helps you then to get back to point number one: who are you really, and what do you see yourself doing? So you may not have that answered. There's some other things very practically you can have answered by the time you land on a campus. But a campus will also help you figure out a few things while you're there at the same time. So as we move into our institutions of higher education, whether it's a university, a community college, a technical college, there's 6 functional areas that I think we need to talk about. And you might be thinking, my gosh, Murphy, you're going to go through all 6 of those areas? Well, this is a lecture all in itself, and I'm not going to be going into detail about all these 6 areas because I want you to understand from this point here, how does this impact your GI Bill? So the things that you need to be asking yourself is your degree type. Do you really understand the difference between an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree? And there's some pro and cons on both those, and that goes back into the time and the opportunities that we'll be talking about in this next section of this presentation. But then what is a graduate degree? And then we talk about this idea of accreditation. So before I move on to accreditation, I just want to stop for a moment and talk about this. So your associate's degree, remember, associate's degrees are foundational. So I may be talking like a majority of military members who are using their GI Bill, who are first-time college students. They just, college wasn't in their past family life. This is the first time you're trying to figure out college, just like myself. And this idea of an associate's degree, it's an entry level, it's a foundation degree, but remember, associate's degree is not required to get a bachelor's degree. As a matter of fact, once you've looked at yourself and you looked at industry, and industry requires a bachelor's degree, then time and money and the essence of the resource that you have on your GI Bill, and I know some 2-year institution people would probably get mad at me for saying this, but there's no need to get an associate's degree whatsoever. As a matter of fact, an associate's degree is about 60 credit hours, where a bachelor's degree is 120 credit hours. Once you get done with your associate's degree, depending if you're in a bridge program or a dual enrollment program, probably a good 25 or 30 of those credit hours that you used your GI Bill to pay for or scholarship or paid out of your pocket do not transfer into a bachelor's degree. The associate's degree is the foundation. It should take up a lot of time in general education, writing and math and history and public speaking, communication skills, political science, these areas that make us all well-rounded thinking, critical thinking people. But be very cautious in the sense of just, I'm going to check off my associate's degree before I move into my bachelor's degree, knowing that the industry is requiring a bachelor's degree. It's not advantageous to get an associate's degree and then move on. You're essentially not utilizing or not optimizing your GI Bill. Whereas you look at a bachelor's degree, you'll hear the term a baccalaureate degree. It's the same thing as a bachelor's degree or an undergraduate degree. It's about 120 credit hours, and then if you go for a quarter semester or a quarter system, it's about 180. This is, again, usually spread out about 4 years of school. So a quick tidbit, the bachelor's degree should take 4 years, that many semesters to be able to accomplish that, about 8 semesters. What we're seeing from traditional students, it takes about 5.5 to 6.5 years to get a 4-year degree. At our institutions, if you see at the bottom of the screen, who have that Veteran and Military Student Success Programs, we're watching our veterans get done in 3.7 to right at 4 years. And again, that depends on how many credits they transferred in. So I want to stop for a moment and go to that accreditation. So as I said earlier, where my fear is that someone here will state the words, I wish I would have known this, or someone would have told this to me before, the information I'm providing you today. Just had a veteran show up in this fall semester at my university who transferred or attempted to transfer 136 credit hours that he received from a business school. So I want to keep in mind that, if the school is legitimate and the professors are legitimate and you're wholeheartedly working to receive that information, it's never a bad day. All that information could be beneficial and to be able to utilize. It's whether the industry or the person who's hiring you looks at that degree and recognizes that degree with some sort of credibility. So out of those 136 credit hours that this individual soldier had accomplished, not a single degree transferred into our program because our programs are so highly accredited. The accrediting agency looks at that, again, based on what the employers are looking for, what industry is looking for, and it's just terrible to be able to tell someone like that nothing transferred in because of our accreditation. Now, accreditation gives us credibility, so when you have that degree, international business MBA, or a business degree or a chemistry degree from whatever institution, that is well respected by the potential employer. So that's where we look at your degree program and your credit transferred into degree. So you're looking at your degree type based on what industry is looking for. You're seeing that it's accredited. Again, go to the board of directors or go to that company and see what type of people they're hiring from what institutions. Make sure it's accredited. And then you start looking at what credits are transferring into that degree program. So for instance, I hear often, I have 40 credits from the Community College of the Air Force, or I have these credits, and now I want to get a degree in nursing. Keep in mind, you never lose those credits, just because those credits may not transfer in, but those credits that you earned while in the Air Force are not nursing applicable credits. Therefore, you don't lose them, it's just that they don't transfer in. A lot of our transfer credits go into the general education. If you took communications or math or English or political science at other places, you're looking to see if those transfer in. But again, if you took those courses from an institution that doesn't have the credibility that employers look for, or the accreditations don't match up, then those degrees or those credits are not going to transfer in. So those three areas, what degree type, the accreditation the institution has, and the degree program and credit transfer is super important. Even before you start thinking about utilizing your GI Bill, you want to be able to answer those three questions right there. Now we're looking on to our graduate degree. As you see here, graduate degree, depending on what degree, we happen to have a a clinical psychology, a graduate degree in clinical psychology, or a master of business administration, depending on the MBA, whether it's all online or it's a hybrid or a brick and mortar school. It varies between those 32 to 36 to 45 credit hours. And again, when I talk about optimizing your GI Bill, you want to be able to use all of your GI Bill to accomplish all the degree types in which you're looking for. And it's perfectly logical and reasonable to have the 36 months of a GI Bill and to accomplish your undergraduate degree. And if you're hustling, your graduate degree, and I'll have some stats for you in a moment when we look at that. So as we keep moving on, now we have this bottom area. Remember earlier I talked about, the value that education has, whether it's utilizing your education to kind of that Maslow, the top run, self-actualization, knowing yourself, or just moving through to get right back into industry. There's a conversation happening within higher ed and DoD right now that talks about this experiential training that you had in the military, and does that cross over into higher education? And in some of those areas, like the technical colleges, whether you're a wrench tuner or a welder or an aircraft mechanic, that's a completely logical transition of skill sets from one to another. Again, you'd have to take a look at Boeing to see what are their aircraft mechanic requirements look like in their accreditation and credibility as opposed to what you were doing in the military. And then in the technical college world, whether HVAC or air conditioning or welding, the same type of thing. But when you start getting into upper level universities, colleges, master's degree, that is not so clean as to transfer those credits, whether it's a leadership course, does that cleanly transfer over to a leadership course by an accredited institution for a leadership and management course, BADM 371, for example, or an ethics course or a public speaking course, does that transfer over to a communications course? It's not that easy. And one of the things you have to ask yourself is, again, the purpose of higher ed. What do you want to accomplish while you're on the college campus, whether you're remote or whether you're on a brick and mortar course? So you're looking at that, then you're moving into the tuition and residency. So I'm going to hit that very quickly. Keep in mind your GI Bill, whether it's, the Post 9/11 GI Bill, Montgomery GI Bill is a little bit different. Post 9/11 GI Bill only pays the in-state rate. So if you're going to a state and for some reason you've been tagged as a non-resident of that state, and you got a non-resident tuition, the GI Bill is only going to pay the resident portion. Now there is a yellow ribbon program out there depending on the institution that might close the gap a little bit to that yellow ribbon program. But keep in mind your tuition, is it covered by the GI Bill? That's usually predicated by your residency or your non-residency. You'd want to know what your tuition is. The GI Bill, if you're a public institution or a private institution, nonprofit, or a private for-profit institution, the GI Bill will pay the highest in-state tuition rate of that state, and it caps at that. Therefore, if your tuition at that private for-profit institution is higher than that, you might be looking at a yellow ribbon program opportunity or coming out of pocket for the rest of that. So again, as we work through knowing ourselves, to industry, to education, tuition and residency is extremely important. Then finally, on this idea of the institution of higher education, is military friendly. It's a term that's been coined. It's out there. A lot of schools have the military friendly designation, but specifically you're looking for an organization that gets behind its entire cohort of military connected students, whether it's a vet like myself, or it's a military spouse like yourself, or a currently service member, or a military family member. You want to be able to look at how connected is that institution to help you optimize your GI Bill to be able to use that to accomplish your goals. So when we take a look at time to market in this final area, so over here on your left, maybe your right here, I see this often with military members. They get on campus and they're just hustling through. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's why I have this and or. But there's more that comes out of higher ed in your transition. These U.S. Army and an airman right here, 2 veterans, and just getting involved with the community. There's something about the transition that takes place in through higher education that you can't put a price tag on. And that's the importance of having that veteran and military student. We call ours a success center. Some institutions call them support centers. There's something there that kind of mimics the camaraderie that we enjoyed while in the military, that you can be doing that at an institution. So again, I'm not discounting this over here, but sometimes going it solo is not the best way to get through your higher education experience. When we start looking at retention and graduation rates, it's these men and women who go by themselves who tend to go by the wayside versus those people who are looking at the fulfillment. In this slide you're looking at right now, the three people on your right, besides the young lady lower into the screen, an Air Force veteran, a Navy veteran, and a Navy veteran right here. And this is just this idea of, this is a scholarship reception ceremony with the donors on the left and the scholarship recipients, all military veterans right there on the right, just transitioning and networking and relearning their trade, learning how to grow a beard and communicate to the civilians. There's just so much more that takes place in higher ed that also helps optimize your GI Bill, that as you're transitioning, there's a time for a purpose. So again, there's a time to get to market, and you can't discount that at all, but also there's a huge time for a purpose that you're looking at as well. So what we just got done doing on the top three areas, and the question I want you to be asking yourself is, identify what you desire to accomplish in addition to your degree. So yeah, you want to know why you get out of bed in the morning, what's your credibility gap, and then you're finalizing this idea of what do you hope to accomplish while obtaining your degree. So now we're looking at the educational benefits. Specifically, I'll be looking at the Montgomery GI Bill and the post 9/11 GI Bill and kind of comparing these and how to optimize your benefits. But there's so much more to the VA education and training benefits that are out there that you need to look at as well. This is one of those points that I hear almost every semester that I wish someone would have told me this information before. And that's the free application for federal student aid. Don't discount the federal aid outside of the VA, the GI Bills that are out there, including the state benefits that as well. So quick life hack for those of you who are looking to go to a technical school or a community college, that you realize that 18 months of school or that associate's degree is going to get you into the job market you're looking for. For me, especially in South Carolina, I don't even know if I tell anybody. I tell them I'm a vet, but I don't know if I tell anybody about the GI Bill, because there's so much that you have a GI Bill. There's so many state benefits that are out there that you could utilize, including scholarships, that it might be advantageous, especially if you have the forever GI Bill, the post 9/11 GI Bill that doesn't expire, that you could use all kinds of state benefits to pay for your school, get through school, get your credibility and your certification, and move out without even touching your GI Bill. And that's not even going into student loans. That's just using the Pell Grant that takes place from this free application of federal student aid to life, Hope scholarships, state benefits that are out there. So keenly look at how can you pay for your school before you even touch your GI Bill. And again, the GI Bill provides some things that none of these other federal benefits or state benefits provide. But don't forget specifically your FAFSA. Now what you have in front of you here, now this is the 2021-22 academic year deadlines. Specifically over here, the Commission of South Carolina says that we want your FAFSA to be completed by the 1st of October. Now you can still do that, but remember these student loans and Pell Grant are on a first come first need basis. So you have some timelines out here. Forms must be submitted very specifically by 11:59 Central Time on June 30th, 2022. That's for the 21-22 academic year. And then state deadlines. So you have state deadlines, you have college individual deadlines and when you apply for school, then you have state deadlines, and then you have federal government deadlines. And this is going to make sense in a moment. And this is one of my life hacks for optimizing your GI Bill, is utilizing the federal benefits outside the VA and then and maximizing the opportunities that you have here with FAFSA. So keep in mind, as a veteran, as a spouse, if you have the GI Bill, you can use FAFSA at the same time. You could use the Pell Grant. Doesn't mean you should be taking out the subsidized or the unsubsidized loan. So I should probably back up for a moment for those first-time college students. FAFSA is a federal program, and it gives you 3 pots of money depending on your income from your previous tax year: an unsubsidized loan, a subsidized loan, and a Pell Grant. The 2 that I mentioned earlier are, in fact, they are loans. You have to pay them back. One accrues interest from the minute you take out the loan. The second one doesn't accrue any interest until after 6 months after you graduate or you stop going to school. That's the subsidized loan. That's the one that perhaps you might want to tap into. But then it also offers a Pell Grant up into X amount of money per year, and that's divvied out between the 2 semesters. So that's money that's directly coming at you in addition to your GI Bill, and the Pell Grant is not money that you have to pay back. So here's what a spring 21 timeline looks like, and I'm just asking you to hold on tight with me because we haven't even got to the GI Bill yet, but this is where I start dabbing into the optimizing of your GI Bill. Because if you take your financial aid timeline and then you're working with your school, especially if they have a Veteran Success Center like ours does, or a support service that some schools have, you want to make sure that your GI Bill is in sync with this federal student loan that you see here, or this federal timeline you have here, which is the Pell Grant. So very specifically, over here you see November 18th. So at our institution, you could register for the spring classes on October 26th. So you register for all of your classes, and then you're going to find out what your anticipated financial aid will look like by around November 18th. And it's posted in SSC as Self-Service Carolina for our USC system. So you get this anticipated, this is how much money you can expect. Remember, this has got nothing to do with the GI Bill right now. And then on November 19th, you can start to see your bills. Your bill actually shows up. Now, your bill is not due, doesn't need to be paid until January 6th. So you have your bill that comes out that you can actually see, but it's really not the payment for the payment, or the payment plan has to be arranged by this date here. So you've got plenty of time between November and January to figure out how you're going to pay for school. So it's really important, if you register for your classes on October 26th, and you can see that it's been posted, your bills are available on the 19th. Now you need to be talking to your school certifying official to ensure they're certifying you if you're going to use your GI Bill on that date. Because on that date, if that's sent to the VA with tuition and fees, that by the time that this date rolls around where payment has been made, that's plenty of time for the VA to go ahead and make that payment. So if you're utilizing federal student loans or federal student aid, the Pell Grant, that money comes to here, that money goes straight back over to you on the 10th of January. This is where the refunds, because your post 9/11 GI Bill pays 100% tuition and fees, and again, this is all based on going full-time, 12 credit hours, your rate of pursuit for, a traditional institution, so to speak. You can see how your GI Bill and your certification process dovetailed into your financial aid timeline can ensure that all of your money hits your account, which your GI Bill paid your tuition and fees. Any Pell Grant that you received then gets sent to you before the semester starts. In our timeline, the semester starts at about the 12th to 14th of January. If you were certified for your tuition and fees, or even your book for the post 9/11 GI Bill back in November, that means your book stipend should be hitting your account right around the same time. So around January 10th, your book money's there, your Pell Grant money's there, your tuition and fees is already paid, your housing allowance should be showing up right around the 1st of February, and then you're just moving through with your education, not having to worry about where the money is coming from. That rolls us into where we're kind of winding down in this presentation, what I call the $13,000 decision, the 13K decision. And so more times than not, I see very motivated men and women who will come into my office and they've clicked the button. They've clicked the button on the VA wants where they go into VA and they receive their post 9/11 GI Bill. And I ask them, have you accepted your post 9/11 GI Bill yet? And they say, yeah, I did. I just clicked that yesterday. Now, I won't even bring up to them what I'm getting ready to bring up to you right now, and that's what I call the 13K decision. So if you look at your Montgomery GI Bill, it's 36 months worth of benefits. You paid into this, and this is the Montgomery GI Bill that most of you currently are sitting on if you haven't used your post 9/11 GI Bill. So the GI Bill right here is for October 2020. It pays $2,122 a month. Your traditional institution, going full-time, 12 credit hours, it's about 3.5 months. So you take that 2,122 times 3.5. That gives you every semester about $7,427. So as you're looking at that, it's simple math from that to that gives you that. And then the benefits you have remaining is 32.5 months worth of benefits because you went for one semester and used 3.5. The point I'm going to be showing you here in a moment is whether you're buying, and this is what I want you to think about, you're buying credit hours. So whether you buy 12 credit hours or 18 credit hours for that same 3.5 semesters, you're still getting, it's still costing you the same amount of money. It's still costing you 3.5 months. And as you can see, as your second semester, as we move towards your final semester, which this benefit will play for, which would be about 11 semesters, it gives you in South Carolina at my well, nationally right here it's the same number. It's about a $76,000 benefit. So that's the Montgomery GI Bill, a little bit different than the Post-911 GI Bill. When we look at the Post-911 GI or the Montgomery GI Bill, one thing I want you to recognize is 32.5 months, and again, as I briefed earlier, it's 76,392 totals to benefit you receive. So you might be thinking, well, why are you bringing this up to me? I have the Post-911 GI Bill. It's a lot more lucrative. Well, again, remember I said earlier it's a $13,000 decision you're getting ready to make. So again, rate of pursuit is full-time. You look at the tuition and fees for my institution, $5,199 per semester. And then you look down at the bottom here, fees. Our fees are about 181, security fee and technology fee, those type of things, about 181. The Post-911 GI Bills pays if you have a COE for 100%, pays 100% tuition and fees, gives you a housing allowance, $1,305. Remember, that's based on the zip code of the institution of where you're attending. That's 3.5 months of that housing allowance right there. Again, if you use it for one semester, you got 32.5 months remaining. That gives you each semester roughly a $500 book stipend, $1,000 per academic year. The fees, so that's a $10,000, $447 benefit. And so most people will say, Murphy, it's crazy. Why would I go with a $76,000 or a $7,427 benefit when I can clearly get $10,447.50 of the benefit? Same thing is after you use all your benefits, you can see where it scales down from 32 to 29. Then you're down to, fall 24 when you started at fall 20. Now you're down to 4.5. You use 3.5. You go on 1 month remaining with a total $104,000 and change, $104.5 thousand. Huge difference. Now, one life hack, you probably already know this, I hope all of you do. For the veterans in the room today, if you have 1 month remaining on your COE, your certificate of eligibility, that 1 month buys you an entire semester of school. 1 month of benefits will pay for the 3.5 months worth of tuition and fees, the housing allowance, the book stipend. So don't discount, and I should say 1 day of benefits, not 1 month. Don't discount how many days of benefits when you're looking at your certificate of eligibility and you only have 2-3 days left of benefits. Remember, that will get you a semester. That's like getting a $10,447 benefit for 1 day worth of benefits. But unfortunately, all the math I just gave you are the wrong questions. That's the wrong way to be thinking about your GI Bill. What you need to be thinking about your GI Bill, specifically when it comes down to your education, your Montgomery GI Bill and your Post-911 GI Bill, it's what do you need? What does industry require? Remember, we went from who are you, your industry, and then we went to your education. So what are you buying? How many credit hours? What kind of education do you need? Are you looking for a PhD? Are you looking for a master's degree or an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree? What are you looking for? So this chart tells you right now that if you use your Montgomery GI Bill and you exhaust your Montgomery GI Bill, all of its benefits, as I said before, it's $76,392, and you don't touch your Post-911 GI Bill. You use your Chapter 30 GI Bill. Now, in my case, our Chapter 30 right here will pay 100% of your tuition. It will pay for that tuition and fees. It's $7,000. Remember, our tuition and fees was $5,000. So it pays for your, right there, it pays for your tuition and fees. It just doesn't come as a lump sum like the Post-911 GI Bill does. What we're looking at here, though, is that if you exhaust your Chapter 30, the VA will give you another 12 months worth of benefits at the Chapter 33 rate. So therefore, if the way we should be looking at our GI Bill is how many credit hours do I need to buy, essentially how much of a degree or degrees do I actually need to have to make me credible to go out into industry so that I stand apart from the rest of the competition that's out there to be hired for the position. So what you're looking at here from from left to right is Essentially, these 36 months of benefits, if you're hustling, doing 18 credits per semester, you can buy 198 credits. Remember, a bachelor's degree is 120, an associate's degree is 60, anywhere between 30 to 60 or 50 credit hours is a graduate degree. You have plenty of credits. Total education, 270. That's 2 undergraduate degrees if you're hustling. And if the competition or if the industry requires you to be that skilled out there, you have enough money to be able to do that. Credit hours low, which means you're just going at a rate of pursuit of 12 credit hours per semester. Use your Chapter 30. There's an undergraduate degree with a couple credits left over. Then you get your Chapter 33. There's 48 with a total of 180. That's clearly, if you want to have enough benefits for an undergraduate degree and a graduate degree, then you use your Montgomery GI Bill, you use your post 9/11, they call stack them up for that right there. Average, as you can see, stacking these up is 225 credit hours. So essentially, it's an $818,000 benefit by stacking these both up. So again, it's not a month-to-month decision about using your GI Bill. It's the big picture. How much education do I really need to have? Of course, looking at your current cash flow, some of you might need that housing allowance, but depending on what you're doing, and you can go a full-time rate of pursuit, then stacking these two things, if 2 degrees or an undergraduate and a graduate degree is required, then before you click that box, remember this, you're making a $13,000 decision. The $13,000 decision comes from you have a $118,000 benefit you're holding on to. The minute you click that you don't want to use the Montgomery GI Bill and you use the post-9/11 GI Bill, it's that $104,000 to the $118,000. That's where I get that $13,000 decision. So what I need you to be asking yourself right now is how many credits do I need to purchase to close my credibility gap? So when you're thinking about education benefits, federal benefits, FAFSA, state benefits, state scholarships, looking at your GI Bill, what do I need to do to close my credibility gap that you looked over here? Now we're looking at time and opportunity. So throughout this whole process, and we're kind of bringing this presentation to its close, you're looking at strategic opportunity, management, and leadership. Between all of this that you've been working for right now, you're constantly looking for opportunities. What I mean by that is 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago when I was on Capitol Hill, had you asked me that I'd be sitting here in front of the camera giving you this presentation about all this VA, higher education type of stuff, I'd be like, are you a mad person? I don't even know what you're talking about. At that time when I was on Capitol Hill, a retired Marine Corps officer working on Capitol Hill, I had a PhD, a public high school diploma. So I had credibility because of my skill set and had a position because of my skill set that I had in the military that put me into a very significant position in higher ed without ever going to college. But at that time, I wanted to be able to use and go back to school because that's just something I never had an opportunity to do in the past. So now I'm looking for opportunities. So now I have this opportunity to be working in higher education. So I just want you to stop and read this for a second. I won't read it to you, but I want you to think about the opportunities and positioning yourself for the opportunity. 3.8 million people are getting ready to graduate. Graduation ceremonies look like this, an endless seas of cap and gowns. And if your idea of positioning yourself for your future employment looks like this, and you haven't kind of backwards planned the way I've looked at backwards planning this with you of asking those very specific questions, you might be looking like one of these people here, or you could be looking at one of these people here. Now I know this picture looks very business-esque, but it's the idea of the confidence, the assurity, the credibility that comes from these people who are ready to go back to the marketplace because they know themselves, they've studied the industry, they went to higher ed, studied the education, they maximize their benefits so they're not in debt when they graduate from school. They utilize their GI Bill, and now they strategically are looking for opportunities to place themselves into corporate America, essentially asking you, what makes you stand out from the rest of the competition? Strategy is all about a competitive advantage that makes you stand apart from the next person who's out there. So what sets you apart from the competition? What is your competitive advantage? And if you go for those first 5 steps I've talked to you about, that will put you in a position of competitive advantage. So now it comes down to taking the shot. How do you make decisions? And so what I'm challenging you here with this idea is evidence-based decisions. So you look at all the data, you look at everything before you, and again, this could be a stepping stone approach, but certainly don't start looking at industry until you ask yourself, just where do you plan on living? What does your commute look like? And who do you hope to wake up next to every single day and have come jump on your bed, little bambinos or little kids at one point? What does that look like for you? So then as you move along to industry and higher education and benefits and not getting in yourself in debt, look at the evidence in front of you and then start making your decisions. So what objective evidence do you have that supports your decisions? So here's the 6 questions I've laid out for you. Knowing yourself, what's your credibility gap, identify what you desire to accomplish in addition to your degree, how many credits do you need to purchase to close your credibility gap, what sets you apart from your competition, and finally, what objective evidence do you have that supports your decision? So I opened up with this, my goal, my hope, and my fear. And my goal is that one person's listening to this lecture makes this statement, I'm glad I heard this information before I made my higher education choice. My hope is everybody listening says, Murphy's information's common knowledge. We got it. Fist pump. Really appreciate you doing this, Murph, but we got it. My biggest fear is someone say, and I hear it all too often, is I wish I would have heard this information 2 years ago or 6 months ago or a year ago. I don't want that to be you. Look, at Jordana can give you my contact information. I covered a lot of information during this 45 months, but this 45 minutes, it may have seemed like 45 months to you. I hope not. But my point is optimizing your GI Bill is just not knowing the GI Bill. Optimizing your GI Bill is knowing yourself, knowing the industry, knowing the institution, how to get out of college debt free, and then looking at opportunities as you go along, and then making an evidence-based decision. I hope this presentation has been beneficial for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me. You can look us up on the web at VMSSC. That'll bring you right to our social media page where you can look at the University of South Carolina Aiken, see what my team is all about. Love to have you come pay us a visit. But if you land anywhere in the United States and you've got a question, or not in the United States, a question about anything I've talked about, please get a hold of Jordana, and she can get a hold of me and connect us together. I appreciate this time we've had together. Again, I welcome you, and I just look forward to perhaps, hopefully, this presentation connecting you in one way or another. Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care now.